conversations. All right. Welcome everyone to the Arcadia Book Club discussion of The Heart in Winter by Kevin Barry. So I like to watch author interviews, especially Politics and Prose always has really interesting interviews with authors because it's just like we do. They do a reading and then just people in the audience ask questions.
I've got a bug in here that I'm trying to get rid of.
They often have
What?
really questions.
Yeah.
Larry on mute for a bit here. So he started this book in 1999. He had earned enough money to not work for 3 months, and so he went off to some little spot to write, and nothing happened. But then he went into the town where he was writing, and he learned all about how the miners moved from Ireland to Butte. 10,000 miners moved from Ireland to Butte. So Butte kind of became this small Ireland.
Doesn't it have? I'm sorry, Nancy, to interrupt. Doesn't it have still have a very large proportion of Irish descendants in Butte?
Yes. Yes. He said when he went there to visit, he was like royalty because he had a real Irish accent. So and then the people in the town gave him like this trove of letters of like their ancestors that they had in a box somewhere. And so then he was able to use that for research. But then all that stuff went under the bed for a few, another decade or two until he finally ended up writing the book. So his description of this book is a Western with Irish accents.
Which
but
is
that explains.
And just for a demographic, I just Googled what the population of Butte was in 1890. It was 23,000 people.
Well,
wow.
half of them are Irish.
Yeah, and it had grown from a handful of residents 1874 to 3,300 in 1880 and 23,000 in 1890.
Yeah. Wow.
So
yeah, that was part of the problem with those towns. They grew so fast. But once there was mining, some kind of mineral that brought people there, and that's one of the reasons that it was so hard to have reliable law enforcement or town services or anything. I mean, they were just really rough stuff. I remember, didn't I write in the newsletter thing about McCabe and Mrs. Miller? Yes. If you've never seen that movie and you want to get a feeling for what that it's set about 10 years later. It's set right around 1900, but it's unbelievable what Altman creates. And they actually built a town up in the Cascades. And then they hired a bunch of the guys who were doing the nail banging to be extras in the film. And they just kept building the town while he was shooting the movie. And it's really a remarkable film. And it has 3 bounty hunters who come. And that's when I was reading the book, I thought, wait, this is just like McCabe and Mrs. Miller. I mean, this part of it, and he mentions that he used that idea of these 3 bounty hunters. Yeah, so I urge you all to watch. It's got great Leonard Cohen music before really Leonard Cohen was Leonard Cohen, when Leonard Cohen was still a poet, mostly, and not a musician. And it's shot by an Eastern European cinematographer named Vilmos Zsigmond, and it's just unbelievably beautiful how it's shot, and it's all in winter. So if you whether you like the book or not, the movie will stay with you for a very long time. Julie Christie and Warren Beatty are the 2 stars. Okay, that's all I have to say. I'm gonna take off early because, you know, I got stuff to do.
You have to go to the convention. Maybe you need to watch a convention, James.
Ah, I thought somebody said he has to go to confession, which I thought, well, someone's channeling my mother. Okay. Okay, somebody talk.
Well, it isn't going to be my Christmas present book to anybody. Kind of hard to find anybody that I really liked in this book.
Careful, Al, you're channeling your inner Larry.
I'm channeling Larry, yeah, right. I don't know. It probably is a dead-on description of the Wild West, the lawless Wild West, and how the people lived or tried to live. Reminded me a little bit. I'm trying to think of the author of Angle of Repose and those Western books too that sort of capture the same feeling of the miners and the lack of law, and it was just everybody going for it, and you did what you had to succeed. I didn't know drugs were so prevalent back then. I thought it was all alcohol. So I guess I learned something.
Well, that's also, there's a whole Chinese contingent in McCabe and Mrs. Middle. Then they all live in their own little area of town, even though the town is nothing. And yeah, they all smoke opium. So it was very, very prevalent then.
So was that what Tom was using all the time, or
Yeah,
what was he using? Okay.
alcohol and opium.
Yeah, okay.
See, I wish that I had, I mean, I'm kind of along the same vein as Al. It was hard for me to find anybody that I liked, and that translated into then my appreciation of the book. The language is pretty, the way he writes, I don't know him. He's completely new to me, so I don't know his style. It's a pretty amazing style and some incredible use of words. Although at times it was funny, I got bogged down in the sentences that, it's not that they were so long, but I'd get halfway through and then I went, all right, wait a moment. He's left out a whole bunch of words and he's expecting me to fill those words in, which, I couldn't, it would stop me. I'd go, okay, now I got to stop and try and figure this out. But, I think it would have helped even just with understanding a little bit more. I suppose I could have done my own research, but I never thought about like researching Irish life in Butte, but same like with the drugs. And now now I know it's opium. Would it have made any difference? But I also didn't know, unless I missed it, who the Celestials were until the final couple of chapters, and it finally mentions something about them being the Chinese. So I think all along I was reading with little pieces that I wanted answered and didn't get answered until the end, or even not at all, which made it hard for me to really appreciate the story.
Oh, I can follow what you said, Mary Pat. But I think for me, this is a book that, just like some movie where you go, wait, what's happening? And then in the end, you figure some things out. This is a book I feel I need to read again and go, yeah. Here's these little clues that have been dropped in as you go along. And his writing, just like you said, I'd have to stop and reread something, kind of like, okay, now I get what's going on here. Okay. But one of the things, he uses words that I'm like, is this a real word? And then you come another one, is this a real word? I should have written them down and like looked them up, but it was just,
Yeah.
and I'm like, okay, well, I'll just go, I get the sense of what he's saying, you know, and I'm like, so is that a real word or not? So that's one. I mean, I tore through this book because I just really, it pulled me along. I read it weeks ago, thinking, you know, it would take time to, you know, that I'd finish it right before our, you know, meeting here. But it's just, yeah. The only quibble I have is he had him on a Palomino horse, which is a very striking. I had a Palomino horse. They're very striking. You would not mistake this. Two people are riding through town on a Palomino horse. It's like, come on, you're, you know, you're putting them out there with a spotlight on them. Anyway, that's just a little aside, but I like the book, and I think I'll read it again just to pick up on all the little pieces and put it together.
Yeah, I agree. The Palomino, I mean, that's just a horse that he admired, and so that's the horse he wanted. But I mean, and especially when you're, you know, when there's all that land and people are moving around, and a lot of people can't move or anywhere. So anybody who's moving, people are going to notice.
Well, right, and you're on the run.
Yeah,
Come on.
you know, and it's just you think, wow, okay.
Well, I love that comment, Barbara. I'm not a horse person, so you know, it didn't mean anything to me other than, oh, it's a Palomino horse, whatever that is. But when you know what it is, it can take you out of I went to a show once and the character was supposed to be overdosing on aspirin, only the bottle that they used, long story, but the bottle that they used was a prescription medication bottle. And it just bothered me so much. It took me out of that moment because I went, that's not an aspirin bottle. And you told me it's supposed to be aspirin, but it's in the wrong bottle, like with the horse.
But that's see, that's just bad directing. Sorry. It doesn't take much to notice, you know, when you're doing tech that, you know, your first question is, where's the props person? Get that damn bottle off the stage and find me an aspirin. How hard is it to find an aspirin bottle?
It is hard to find a horse, though.
Yeah.
Harder to find.
But I do think that was interesting because that just shows it's an example of how Tom just went without thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, I found it to be just a rollicking good time. I mean, I was just like, woohoo! Because every John Wayne movie had the goofy cowboy. And so this is just a book full of goofy characters. And they were going to live or they were going to die. I mean, that was just about the only choices they have. There was no thriving in this at all. And the underside of comedy is also the sadness. I mean, she ends up kind of destitute and alone. He dies a horrible death with the fight with the guy. But, you know, the funniest scene had to be when the big sheriff had his heart attack and fell all over him. I mean, I must have read that scene a dozen times, chuckling each time. So you're right, Al. This is not a book to give somebody for Christmas, but it's a good time.
Yeah.
I felt that he gave Tom like more than 9 lives. You know, it's like, okay, who would have saw the you know, the sheriff falling over from a heart attack right in their cabin? Okay, that's good. And then they move on, and you know, different things happened there where they were you know, helped by other people. It's just like, and yet it didn't feel, what's the word I want? Maybe it didn't, kitschy or forced or something. I don't know. It just felt
Contrived, didn't feel contrived.
dumb luck.
Dumb luck. Yeah, that dumb luck
came into a lot of my thought about this, and it was, I agree with Al. I didn't find anyone really attractive in this, or I just didn't say, hey, these are some decent people that are finding themselves in a hard situation, and they're doing the best they can. And I struggled through the book. I read it on airplanes, and that was all I had to do. So I was able to focus on it, but it was work to focus on it. And the story, I guess I found myself more drawn to the description of the towns and the scenery than I did to the description of the action. And that's what I thought was good about it. And it wasn't predictable. So yeah, I was amazed at the ending, but I just wasn't drawn in.
Well, there was that one moment, maybe a third of the way through, where there's just one sentence where he lets you know that she's going to survive.
Oh.
Because that she, because he mentioned something about later in her life,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just one sentence, and it just goes along, and if you happen to notice, you go, oh, okay, well, at least one of them's going to live. It's it sort of makes you think a little harder about what might happen to him. But listening to you all, it's really, I remember sitting in a movie theater 30 years ago and watching Quentin Tarantino's first movie, Reservoir Dogs, which everybody was raving about. And I went with my first wife, and it was about 2/3 of the way through. And I kept kind of looking over at her to see if she was interested, because she was always a good barometer for me of whether we could leave early or not. And she seemed pretty engrossed. And finally, I just couldn't take it anymore. And I said, "Are you enjoying this?" And she said, "No, I hate it." And I said, "Let's get out of here." And we left. But listening to you all, it started to make me think: do we need to like people in a film or a book in order to, or at least like somebody, to enjoy the book or be carried through the book? And I find it's much, much easier for me to read a book in which I like no one than it is to watch a film where I can't, connect with anybody. But what are your feelings about that? Because because this is, I would never try to persuade you that this book is likable. That the characters are likable, but I found it, like Barbara, I found it very hard to stop reading. You just kept waiting for these, for what could possibly happen in these terribly damaged lives. My God.
Well, maybe, James, I think it's two different questions you're asking. Do we like a person in a character in the book, or can we relate in some way? Because did I like anybody? Not really, but could I relate to them? Well, I think the passion that the couple had for each other, that I was drawn to that. I don't feel that way, but personally, but I was drawn to that. And when you were talking about movies, it made me think of Bonnie and Clyde a bit.
Yeah.
It's like they couldn't live without each other. And it seems that way to me here in this book. And then I don't know why I had like movies going on in my mind with this, but I don't know if anyone has seen The Great Lebowski.
Of course, yeah.
Okay. So, there's this one character in the movie that keeps coming back to Lebowski, and he's, I don't know, is he the dude, the guy, Sam Elliott with the mustache?
Yeah.
And he's kind of the all-knowing, and he gets the movie going along. And I found that character towards the end, the one guy who slaps him across the face and, basically says, snap out of it type of thing. So, do you have to like him, or can you at least relate some way? I don't know. I have to say, and I'm sorry, I don't know your name, who's with Charlotte.
Mike.
Mike. I found reading it kind of laborious, in the sense that I would be reading half a page And I felt like, okay, I'm dancing now, you know, in the sense that I can read it. And then another sentence further, I'm like, what is that? And so I'd be reading it over again and again. And then okay. And then I'd go on. It was more work, I think, than I was willing to do. But I gotta say, if it wasn't for an Arcadia book and this club here, I would have stopped because I wasn't enjoying it. But the further I got in the book, the more I was enjoying it, at least.
It's perfectly okay to not finish a book for book club.
Yeah, but you know, I have such faith in James and Nancy. It's like, okay, what do you all see in it? And I'm gonna hang in there and carry. It's just like Tomorrow and Tomorrow. When I started that book, I thought, what? And then I loved it. So yes, there are books that I do stop because I'm not gonna, but not for this group.
Well, and you know, kind of along that line of, I mean, it was hard work. I'm reading going, all right, this is a really hard read for me. I'm not liking the people. It kind of feels like a slog, but yet, and I honestly, I can own this. I still wanted to find out what happened to them, which tells you that, okay, even though I pretty much would say I didn't like the book, I wanted to finish it because I wanted to know how it ended. So clearly there's something there that was propelling me forward.
Agreed. I agree with you, Mary Pat.
And maybe that's a mark of a good writer,
Yeah.
Yeah, probably.
to compel us to slog through to the end because we want to know what happened, what's going to happen. That was definitely on my mind, you know, who's going to die and who's going to live. So
Yeah, I thought you do start, I mean, your comment about him having all those lives. Yeah, you do start to think, God, how could, you know, sooner or later, the way he's living, you know, it's like having a friend, you know, I've had plenty of friends who've been pretty out there in the way they take life on, and, you know, half of them are dead now, and that's not surprising because, you know, there's a price many of us pay for trying to be on the edge all the time. But it's, but yeah, he was a lost soul. Well, what about faith? You know, there's a lot about faith in this book, and a lot about God and religion. You know, and he's an Irish person. I grew up in an Irish family, and you know, everybody went to church, and my mother. You know, it was very hard on her when I stopped going to church when I was in college, but you know, so it's just woven into your psyche, all this, you know, the stuff about God and faith and what you should be living for and purpose. And I mean, did that strike any of you as a false note or a real or something plausible for someone like him?
Well, I've been listening. I figured out how to listen in the car, but I did not figure out how to unmute or talk. So let me respond to everything I've heard for the last 30 minutes, including your comments. I was with two people who were at the rally last night, and they were there for like 4 hours. And the one woman was worried that Governor Walz would outshine Kamala, and that was not the case. I agree with Adele about Michelle Obama's best line, but I think it was that Trump doesn't understand he may not be qualified for this because this is a Black job. I'm going to agree with James that if you haven't seen McCabe and Mrs. Miller, it is the best use of Leonard Cohen music that I think there ever is. Although my vague memory is I didn't like the way that movie ended, just like I had some issues with the end of this book. And
what? Are you crazy? That's it, Lindsay. I'm never speaking to you again.
that's fine. But I will also say, since you should go back and watch all of Reservoir Dogs, because it is the best use of Steeler's wheel stuck in the middle with you during the torture scene. And I'll never forget, I was at a state Democratic convention, and Senator Herb Kohl, who is not known for being with it, very deadpan said, the current politics in Congress remind me of the Steeler Wheel song, Stuck in the Middle with You, clouds to the left of me, jokers on the right, here I am, stuck in the middle with you. If you can imagine Herb Kohl saying that. To get to the book, I'm very pleased to find out I like it better than the majority of the people. But I have some issues that I'll get to. The things that I liked most about the book was the changing point of view in every chapter. It was like, who the heck is talking now? And I do think he's a good writer, because that's not easy to do, the change in the tone of voice and the dialect and everything else. I guess even though the two main characters had a lot of negative qualities, my favorite part was when they were in Providence in their honeymoon time. And I really felt like, maybe love can save these two screwed up people. Because I didn't think so, but I was like, funnier things have happened. And I agree about when the big bounty hunter dropped dead. That was great, because you thought that was the end, that they were going to be killed. And then this is where I didn't like the way I felt the author manipulated me, because it's like, okay, maybe I can have some hope for these people. And to respond to your question about faith and stuff, I had some issues with that, but I'm looking on 172, where Tom says he believed as he was acting through Under the Pull of the Moon and the Tides. He needed to be with this person now that she had been taken from him. He needed to follow and find her. If death came in the way of seeing her again in this life, that was just how it was meant to be. And he was not afraid. For the first time in his life, he was not afraid. So I'm like, he's not afraid. And even though he's incompetent with a gun or a knife or a horse and just about everything else, maybe he can do it. Although on the next page, 173, was my favorite part of the book, when they met this boy and old man who I don't remember what language they were speaking in. But the boy said, in this country, they'll tell you that you can be happy, that it's your right and destiny. And then I think it's the old man or the boy who says, now that's a bunch of horse shit.
It's the old man.
It's the old man saying that.
Yeah.
So I really felt like maybe he can save her. Maybe they don't both have to be killed. So my two complaints are, number one, we're building to this confrontation. He's got the knife. He seems like he's finally got his shit together. And then we don't get the scene. We don't get the climatic scene of the fight with the two other guys. And I believe he successfully kills them, but opens up his wound and dies from bleeding out, I assume. But it's like, you don't build up to a scene and then just kind of mention it off stage. And then when she lived, I thought it was very unbelievable that she lived after the way she was tied up, tortured, abused. But I was like, okay, if you want me to believe that she lived, then he should have lived also, and they should have run into each other 10, 20 years later. I think that would have been a better ending, but I suppose it needed the tragedy of him dying.
Okay, Larry, hold up.
Yes.
Hold up. Nobody else speak. I have to comment about that. A couple of little things. Remember, one of the two remaining bad guys had already killed the other one. So there was only one bad guy left. And so then the two.
Hey, I think I missed that.
Yeah. So there were
there were
three
two.
start. The one,
Yeah.
the head bounty hunter died of a heart attack.
Yeah.
In a bliss-ridden heart attack, and then the other two, one of the other two shot the other guy because he was a creep, and so the only guy left was, had a huge grudge to kill. But the great thing I want to bring up about what you said, Larry, is she survived because of the humanity of the two people who took her in.
Right.
And
but,
that's really,
but also because the last guy was dead.
Well, sure, but that was, but so I would argue the opposite, that the last thing we needed to have in the book was a big knife fight. All we need to know is neither of them lived because they were both shitty with knives, and they both, bled out. But to me, what was much more moving was the fact that these two, a boy and a man, hid this woman and kept her alive and nursed her back to sort of mental health. And finally, she got to go to San Francisco. So if your ending was right, Larry, and the two of them ran into each other on, let's say they're going on California below Battery, and he's walking into the Tadich Grill to have a piece of petroli, and she's working behind the counter, and he walks up to her and she looks at him, and you know what she'd say to him, Larry? Not one word. Get out. Don't talk to me. You tried to kill me too many times. Get away from me. But anyway, I think that I was really moved by the people taking her in and nurturing her.
Yeah. I just want to say the fight scene was really choreographed previously by the woman who showed him how to make the moves when they were at that bar in the town just before he then left and went up to this cabin where she showed him how to do this knife fight so that he would be successful. So the fight was like pre choreographed for us in that part of the scene or part of the book. And I felt grateful, for lack of a better word, that we were spared the grisliness of a fight scene.
But Barbara, that scene made me think he had learned enough to be successful in the knife fight.
Well, he did kill the guy, but it opened up his wound and he ended up dying from bleeding out. So
my objection, I don't think I needed to have seen all the fight, but I did resent as a reader not understanding what had happened until way later. And so then I was confused as I was reading the ending of the book. Okay, what's really going on here? And I thought that I just didn't like not being informed earlier about the outcome.
Listening to the review of the book remind me of one thing that I was thinking about in the background while I was reading it. And you really have to believe in fate to believe this story. I mean, out in the middle of the wilderness without food, and they run into somebody with food. Then they find a cabin at the last moment. Then the guy drops him a heart attack. He's going to a knife fight. He doesn't know how to knife fight, and he runs into a woman who can teach him how to knife fight. I mean, at the end of this whole thing, if you don't believe in fate, it's there's really not much hope for the book because it's all coincidence then.
Yeah.
So that was running in the back of my mind also.
I believe they call it The Luck of the Irish, Al.
Yeah. But I did, usually from characters, even if they're unlikable characters, you learn something about life or about handling something. And I guess with these guys, these two didn't see too much. It was a pretty unique situation, unique to them, with a lot of happenstance and coincidences thrown in. You know, if he doesn't run into that guy in the woods telling him about this little town where they just brought in a shot, and how does a guy shot in the stomach make it to that little town? Another question. But if he doesn't run into that guy in the woods to tell him to go there and look up that guy to find out where Polly is, you know, he's on his way to Butte and he walks down. Knowing him, he probably would have walked down Main Street and been arrested and hung, and that would have been the end of the story. And actually, that's what I thought was going to happen. I thought they were just going to miss each other, and that would be the tragic end of this whole thing. But I don't know. It's nice to think that you could meet that one person and fall deeply in love and change your whole life and everything would work out. But what's that got to do with me? I don't know.
Well, they were tragic star-crossed lovers kind of thing, you know? It just, I mean, it's like, this is not going to end well, you know? It's just not. And oh.
Well,
Yeah.
I guess
Well,
I kind of took it more like just a good old story. I mean, I guess I liked him because he would write the letters of some of the other miners to try to get a wife. I mean, so he had a little bit of a heart of gold, you know.
Well, I agree with, he even said, Barry says about him early on that he wanted to do good for other people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was
I
just
don't think
scared
he's
to
a bad
die.
guy.
Yeah.
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 well, she was still better off than the guy she married, who to me fit the stereotype of all the Christian evangelists, holier than thou. I mean, to me, he was like one of the worst people in the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so at least she got away from him.
Well, they had to make him that way to let Polly off the hook. She dumped the guy, she ran off with the new boyfriend. What's admirable about that? You just make the boyfriend look bad. That's all you left. Just saying.
Oh, Al.
So Nancy, what did you think? I haven't heard you comment.
Okay. Well, I mean, I know that you're all saying the characters weren't that likable, but I did like I liked Polly because I like that she saw her opportunity to not be purchased and took off. What I mean, women in those days, they had not many choices. She whatever I guess we never really totally know what she was kind of running away from. She was, this elderly 30-year-old woman that had like no chances left. So, I don't know. One of my favorite books is All the Pretty Horses, Cormac McCarthy. And I like the romanticism of this crazy adventure, and I enjoyed it. And I like Tom too. I mean, I feel like I've known some people like Tom that they're good people, but man, can they get in their own way?
Yeah.
Just make so many bad choices time after time. Yeah, I mean, those two cross paths and a good time ensued until it was a bad time. So.
I'm Steve, by the way. I'm new here, but those at Arcadia know me. And for Adele, I share your opinion. I thought it was a rollicking, fun read. In fact, I spread it out over a few days just so I could have a little bit to read every couple of days, and it was the highlight of my reading for that day. I thought the characters were terrible but entertaining, and they certainly weren't going to be people I'd want to hang out with. But I found a little bit of sympathy in the Old Testament way of we're all born with sin, and by golly, there was a lot of sin in those characters. So I think there's a little bit of faith in that regard. Oh, the other thought I has, for me, it felt like a Western, right? It was pretty much a straight up Western. It wasn't an Irish book. It was a Western. And I kept thinking as I was reading, I'm like, most of our Westerns glorify the cowboy, glorify the heroes. It's always about those great pioneer spirits and how tough they were and how rugged they were. And I kept thinking, I'm like, probably a lot of people who went west were incompetent idiots because they couldn't make it out east, and they probably, the only reason they were out west is because they couldn't find a job. And so there they are out west, failing just as they would out east. And you're getting to hear a story about how they failed out west, and they proved to be just as incompetent out west. And so, it sort of takes the Western trope and tosses it on its head and say, yeah, it wasn't all the Lone Ranger and Roy Rogers. There was also a bunch of idiots out there who were stumbling, couldn't, as you said, Nancy, who couldn't get out of their own way. No matter, they may have, I wouldn't say that he had a heart of gold. He may have had a heart of fool's gold, but he thought he was trying his best, and boy, he was such an idiot. He couldn't figure out how to succeed, and I was amused. I was laughing. I was like, I just sort of felt, I don't think you needed any more gruesomeness in it. Like, I don't think you needed any more gruesomeness in the knife fight. Like, golly, there was plenty of it at that point. It was almost like a mercy on his part to not show that. But it ends up being, you know what? Wish I'd never met him. And a year later, she forgets who he is. And it's like, it's just like the ending is so funny. Like, I wish the worst thing that ever happened to me was meeting that guy. And then by the end of that chapter, you're like, she can't even remember the story. She can't even remember what happened. And I think it's just so poetically and anti-Western that it was a wonderful book.
I believe he had a heart of opium is what he had.
For sure.
Hey,
the
Larry,
heart of gold may have been gold at one point, but it certainly was poisoned along the way.
pretty tarnished by the time we see him. Larry,
Yes.
do you remember when they introduced the bounty hunters in McCabe and Mrs. Miller and the first conversation with the really scary lead bounty killer?
Too long since I saw the movie.
Well, for the rest of you, there's certain things that and this is your assignment. You've got to see this movie. But the thing that in order to really love the woman in Heart and Winter, just wait till you see the scene the first time Julie Christie eats in McCabe and Mrs. Miller. Just watch the way she eats, and you'll realize something about hunger and about determination and about, it's just an amazing, it's one of those sly Robert Altman moments of genius. But when they first introduced the bounty hunters in that movie, and this one guy is sitting at this table and he's just scary as hell looking. He really is the size of the guy he describes in the book, and huge guy with a gun that's about as big as Delaware. And he's just, and he calls the guy over who owns the saloon, and he says, because there's this rumor that Warren Beatty's killed somebody. And the guy, and he says to Sheehan, he says, who did that guy kill? And Sheehan says, oh, he killed blah, 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 blah. And then the guy he basically does nothing except he just looks up with one eye and says, that man never killed anybody. And your whole stomach drops out of the theater. It doesn't even stay in your body. You just think, uh-oh. And that's what I loved about the moments in this book where you just felt like he just starts turning the dread, up. And so you're just moving along through the book with this constant sense of dread next to it. And it's hugely entertaining, and it's scary. And I think that's, that kind of writing is hard to sustain over, for a long period of time. He kind of does the opposite in his previous novel, Night Boat to Tangier, which is basically his version of Waiting for Godot. It's just two guys sitting and talking, but it's magnificent because he's so good at at what people sound like, at all the various layers of life. But it's I appreciate that you all stuck with it, even though it was not for some of you, it was a difficult thing to stick with, because I do think as what Steve said, that is sort of startling that she doesn't even really remember what happened, 30 years later. It's just kind of this terrible thing that happened, and I've just let it get buried under the rest of my life somehow.
So James, I did want to respond to your comment where you were giving permission to people to not finish reading a book or seeing a movie, because as someone who has fought book bans from people who never read the books, I think you have to read a whole book or watch a whole movie. And then if you hate it, that's fine. But I'm sure we've all read books that halfway through we were lukewarm, and then the last half redeems it. And I did remember you're talking about those characters. I did like the fat cook who did the wake for Tom. He was a good character. I would have liked to have seen or known him better.
Yeah.
Because it was kind of shocking that Tom was more well thought of than he would have ever thought.
Right. Yeah. When they have the wake for him, people really, they liked him.
Yeah.
I thought it was, I'm going back to the beginning. I liked the book in the sense that it gave me a taste of the Old West, and really I kind of buy into the background that he set up here, that this is the sort of thing that'll happen if you have a lawless community with people just desperate to survive, and you're going to get stories like this, and that's what's going to happen. So, and I like I can't remember the author of the other book that I really liked about the West, Angle of Repose, but
Wallace Stevens.
It sort of paints a picture that I didn't, of a reality that I'm not that wasn't that familiar with watching Westerns, and this, in that sense, I like the book, and I'm not sorry I read any of these books, and I'm glad I got through this one too.
Well, that's good. Any other comments? Barbara, you got,
I've got to go.
Wait, Barbara, I've got one thing you have to hear. You were talking about all the Western characters and and all the movies that have full of Western characters. There was a famous character actor named Jack Elam, Elam, who had a very rough face, and look him up sometime. But he gave once the lifespan of a character actor in Westerns, and this is the five steps. Who is Jack Elam? Get me Jack Elam. Get me a Jack Elam type, only younger. Get me a Jack Elam type. Who is Jack Elam? And that's kind of the arc of a character actor's life in the Westerns. They come and then they go away because they just get worn out. But it's the minor characters, Larry, the guy who ran.
I gotta go.
Okay, bye. The minor characters are really, really fun, and I liked the bounty hunter. The evil bounty hunter who died of the heart attack. He was a really interesting character, I thought. Scary but interesting, because he didn't like either of the other two guys, and none of us should have liked either of the other two guys. But it was, Anyway,
kept the woman alive, right? If it weren't for the final third guy, the woman would have been dead.
Yeah,
he kept her alive. He nursed her back to health.
Yeah, true. Good point.
I mean, it's like Yeah.
There's a little good in all of us. Somehow. Okay, Nance.
All
you're
right,
up.
Al. Let's see if we can make you hate next month's book instead. Never regret it. Let's see if we can make you have some regrets. I'm just kidding. Okay, so Steve was in earlier today, and last night I was James isn't going to be with us next month, so I'm picking the book by myself. So I was all set to do Burn by Peter Heller, and then my coworkers were kind of like, when I gave them the synopsis of the two books I was going back and forth between. Burn is two lifelong friends who always go on a hunting trip, and when they are starting to return home, they every place they've gone, like a bridge has been blown out, and I think it's just because the construction company is trying to keep people off the road. But then the little towns they go to are burned down. There are no people, blah, blah, blah. A civil war has started. So my coworkers are kind of like, yeah, let's not do that. And then Steve is like, well, it's kind of like The Road, like another Cormac McCarthy. We kind of just did that with this one. So instead, we're going to do Lady Macbeth by Ava Reed. So this is like a Gothic sort of retelling of Macbeth from her point of view, but it's not like a retelling. I mean, there's similarities to Macbeth, but it's not like a faithful retelling of Macbeth. So don't go into it thinking that's what it's going to be.
So it's another happy-go-lucky book.
Yeah.
Who's the author?
Ava Reed.
EVA Reed?
AVA.
AVA?
Ava Reed.
But
Yep.
that's a good point, Larry. So Nancy, let's find a happy book for
October.
No, for November. Right.
No, October.
Oh, October.
Push it farther than it needs to be already. Maybe the new Olive Kitteridge.
Is this Nancy? Is it September 18th?
Yes.
All right, but I will bring my bottle opener from Cotter Castle.
All right.
Nice. I love it.
And somebody bring the good soap so we can all wash our hands. Okay, so yeah, September 18th, Lady Macbeth. If anybody has a great idea or something they want to read for October, something you're looking forward to, let us know. Or November. December we'll do our year-end wrap-up, and it doesn't have to be something brand new.
Yeah.
If there's something that
In
you've
fact,
been wanting to read or something that you really loved that you want to share with us.
yeah, it'd be nice to have something that wasn't brand new, actually.
Yeah. So put your thinking caps on and give us some ideas for October and November.
Thank
All
you,
right.
everybody. See you in October.
Right.
Thanks, folks. Thank
Thank
you.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Yep. Right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.